not only in our program, but the programs throughout the country, here locally and nationally. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage the House of Veterans Affairs Committee Ranking Member, the Honorable Mark Tankey.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I want to thank U.S. VETS for hosting us today. I'm proud to have a U.S. VETS facility in my home district. It's the March, Michigan Village, near March Air Reserve Base. Some of you in the Air Force might have been that Air Reserve, actually, March was an active duty base. But I'm here to express my frustration by the circumstances which bring us here. I hardly believe that House Democrats are having to fight to get support for some of our most vulnerable veterans, our homeless veterans. We shouldn't have to fight. It should be a no-brainer to support this legislation. You know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Congress acted quickly to make sure that the VA had the flexibility and the resources, instead of with the money, the VA had the resources, the money, and the flexibility it needed to secure the health and safety of the thousands of veterans experiencing homelessness in our country. These flexibilities and resources, these flexibilities and the money, actually helped decrease veteran homelessness by 11% during one of the most difficult times in our country's recent history. I'm going to say that again. What's amazing is that even during the pandemic, we were able to reduce veteran homelessness by 11% because of the emergency resources flexibility we got to the VA. These very successful programs and resources have now been allowed to expire because of inaction by congressional Republicans. As the ranking Democratic member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, I am infuriated by this. Our homeless veterans, one homeless veteran is one homeless too many. Especially when we know what works to get veterans off the streets and into care and permanent home. Last month, in our committee's markup, I pushed for an amendment to be adopted that would have allowed us to pass Representative Sheila Sherpas McCormick's Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act. This bill extends the authorities that have now expired, and the amendment's adoption would have meant that homeless veterans could still get the support they needed to get housed. And it would have made it so that the VA could pay for basic necessities for veterans experiencing homelessness, like food, transportation, clothing, and shelter. On a party line vote, Republicans voted against this amendment and turned their backs on homeless veterans. Committee Democrats have also urged consideration of the passage of Representative Nikita Williams' Return Home to Housing Act. This bill increases the maximum rate at which transitional housing providers in VA's grant per diem program can be reimbursed for our veterans. This bill raises that rate up to $112.20 a day to more adequately reflect the costs of the care, resources, and services our veterans deserve and need on their journey to permanent housing. Now, without passage of this legislation, the maximum rate at which community providers can be reimbursed for care for veterans residing in transitional housing will drop to a mere $64 a day. Now, come on now, you can't even get a hotel for $64 a night. But we expect our nonprofit organizations, such as U.S. VETS, to be able to provide shelter, services, and meals for veterans on that measly sum. Our nonprofit providers perform miracles to fill in the gaps where the funding runs short. But when Congress has the ability to reduce that financial strain, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we act to help veterans access the care and the services they need? Why shouldn't we? We should. I appreciate US VETS hosting us here today at their DC site. US VETS operates transitional housing specifically for veterans at facilities across the country. They provide critical shelter and services to assist veterans in securing a permanent place to call home. They will see their rate of reimbursement for that care and service cut by more than half if Congress does not act. I see many veterans here in the audience with us today, and I promise you, I will continue fighting for the care that you need. US VETS and other transitional housing providers do the hard work of ensuring the safety and health of our veterans. They support our veterans, and we in Congress need to support them as well. So the committee Democrats have solutions. We have two common sense bills that I just talked about that would immediately help veterans experiencing homelessness. Committee Republicans just led successful VA programs that have helped get over 40,000 homeless veterans housed in the last 2 years. We let them expire. So I have to ask my Republican colleagues, are you serious about wanting to end veteran homelessness? If you are, then why aren't you willing to support the programs that we know work? Democrats on the committee and I will continue to push our colleagues across the aisle to take action on this important issue. Failing to extend this authority means that critical gains made to help and house homeless veterans will be clawed back, and veterans in need will spend more time without a place to call home. We cannot leave any veteran behind. I'm committed to the fight for homeless veterans, and I call on my colleagues to do the same. Before I call on my good friend, almost neighbor, from California, I just want to thank every veteran here who's gathered here for your service. Thank you for what you've done for our country. You deserve better. You deserve a place to call home. With that, I'd like to now call on my friend and colleague, the ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee of the Village Presidency, Congressman Mike Levin.
Well, I just want to start by thanking Ranking Member Takano for doing such a tremendous job. I got to Congress in 2019, and Mark served as our committee chair, and just did an incredible job for our veterans, including honoring our PACT Act, which I think many of you have heard about, so that we can finally take care of our post 9/11 veterans who were exposed to toxic substances and burn pits. And it's one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in many years, and Chairman Takano wouldn't have been possible without him. So I hope he's chairman again soon. That's another meeting though. I also want to thank US VETS. Thank you so much to Mr. Lewis. Like Mr. Lewis, I'm the grandson of a World War II veteran. My grandpa was in the Army Air Corps, and I think he would be very upset if he were here knowing that veteran homelessness is such a pervasive problem in our society. In my district, I represent out of San Diego. Hopefully a few of you have visited San Diego. We still have a challenge with around 700 homeless veterans countywide. I'm the former chair, as the ranking member said, and now I'm the ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, where we have jurisdiction over housing, homelessness, and other things like transition assistance, workforce development, the GI Bill. And I have hosted hearing after hearing after hearing on this topic. And we've urged for passage of the Return Home to Housing Act and the Healthy Foundation for Homeless Veterans Act, so that homeless veterans can get the support that they need. I think during the pandemic we learned a lot, and one of the things we learned was what it takes to get veterans safely and quickly into stable housing. It takes urgency, resources, flexibility, and coordination. VA and homeless service providers showed us over the last few years what they can do when they have tools, when they have authorities, and when they have funding. They work together to reduce veteran homelessness, as the ranking member said, by 11% during the pandemic. That is the largest drop in the point-in-time count that we've seen in years. We learned that giving veterans direct access to basic needs like food and transportation, clothing and shelter, are vital to getting them into housing. We also learned that we need to continue reimbursing transitional housing providers like US VETS at a rate that reflects the reality of the cost of care. Prior to COVID-19, I routinely heard from transitional housing providers that the per diem rate was inadequate to cover the actual cost of housing and services for veterans that they're caring for. The elevated per diem rate during the pandemic narrowed that funding gap. Didn't close it, but narrowed it. So providers need to do what they're best at doing. They need to be able to focus on caring for their veterans instead of scrounging to make ends meet to support the cost of that care. So, like the ranking member said, we are deeply frustrated by this. The potential effects of the expiration of the authority's pay for basic needs for homeless veterans and the elevated reimbursement rate for transitional housing providers is so critically important. Last week, I brought my subcommittee to Southern California, to my district, for a field hearing on the topic of veteran homelessness. We heard concerns from providers about having to potentially close their doors due to the imminent funding decrease. That's how serious this is. We cannot allow it to happen. Vice Chair and Ranking Member Takano's call to urgently pass H.R. 491 and H.R. 645. We know that these policies work. Congress needs to do everything it can, not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk when it comes to supporting veterans and our community partners who do the hard work, just like US VETS, who do the hard work day in and day out to end veteran homelessness. No veteran should be without a place to call home. But we're going to commit to working with everybody here to reach our goal to end veteran homelessness. Now, my pleasure to introduce Catherine Monet, the CEO of the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans.
On behalf of veterans and organizations across the country that serve them, the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans calls on Congress to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to supporting veterans experiencing homelessness. Yesterday's expiration of the COVID-19 public health emergency, paired with the inability to agree upon the much-needed legislation to extend the homeless program, will leave veterans suffering needlessly. This failure means that this morning, just this morning, the VA lost the ability to support homeless veterans with basic life needs such as food, tents, transportation, and connectivity. That means that vital supports are now unavailable at a time when unsheltered homelessness is increasing, and at a time when it's more critical than ever for street outreach teams to really meet veterans where they're at to build rapport and to encourage connection with future services and housing professionals. More importantly, this challenge makes it even harder for veterans to stay engaged with key contacts such as potential landlords, employers, case managers, medical support, and others that really support the transition from homelessness into thriving permanent housing. This failure also means that this morning, shelter reimbursement rates dropped by over 60% per veteran per night. For organizations across the country, like the one where we are today, this could result in major financial losses at a time when they're being called upon to provide enhanced services and facilities and do more with us. That's not acceptable. We've heard from providers and THP members across the country who are making really hard choices like cutting facility security, reducing clinical staff on site, creating significant operating deficits, and scrambling to fundraise for them, or even shutting down the veteran focused programs altogether. And that's not an acceptable outcome for them. In an era where we've made significant progress on ending veteran homelessness, there's no morally sound reason to let these critical programs expire. And we all know that ending homelessness has been a long time bipartisan priority. This has been something that we've all been able to work together on. So NCHV demands that Congress restore these benefits for veterans and the organizations that serve them. It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Bird, the Chief Policy Officer of the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm Steve Bird, I'm with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. I've been working on homelessness in Washington, D.C. for over 20 years now. It's not easy work. This week, people who work on homelessness are mourning the deaths of homeless people on the streets in cities around the country. But throughout that whole time, the one bright spot has been the progress of work on veterans homelessness. we have made incredible progress over that. We have VA now running programs that are exactly the programs that we need. We have great organizations like US VETS around the country, putting the money to good use, getting people off the street, getting people back in housing and their lives on track. The one reason we still, after all this time, have thousands of veterans still living on the street is that there has not been enough investment in these programs. Federal investment of money has not been to the scale necessary to make it work. So we have great programs and we have waiting lists because they're not funded well enough. Now we've made progress on that, as the members of Congress have pointed out. During the pandemic, we got new money on the table and it had a fantastic effect. Of course it did. It went into the bank accounts of groups like this to do the kinds of programs we know work, and the number of veterans living on the street went down substantially. We need money to finish this job. Right now, we've got action in Congress that means less money for these programs. That's not right. That can't happen. That's why we've got to pass this legislation, keep that going, get these bills passed, use the momentum from that to do the rest of what we need to do to make sure that nobody who served in the U.S. military is ever homeless again. Thank you all very much. Thanks to the members.
I want to give you some hard numbers. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, National Alliance, Homelessness, thank you, National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. I'm going to give you some numbers that we have here in the U.S. VETS, Washington, D.C. Our 2023 impact statement, we served over 1,100 veterans, bednights that stayed here in our transitional housing program. We outreached 244 veterans. We served over 9,406 meetings. We provided 1,724 hours of mental health assessments, and we placed 120 veterans in new jobs. Those are real numbers, real stats, real facts. And we did that when we had the surge money to do it with. We still have to meet these goals with less money. Our grant per diem rate went from $164.67 to $64.52. I'm going to say that again. The rate that we received for servicing a homeless veteran went from last night $164.67 to $64.52. Like the congressman said, thank you. How can you provide services to a veteran with just $64.52? Housing, food, case management services, all the things that we do to service homeless veterans. We as U.S. VETS, by being the national largest organization in the country to serve veterans, we have some resources to do this, but we have to scramble also to figure out how do we continue to do what we need to do to service homeless veterans. Some of our fellow service providers in this community, like Access Housing, don't have the resources that U.S. VETS has, which means they're going to struggle even more. But we have to figure out how to adjust and meet the needs. And one of the things we can do is advocate for this bill. This bill is so important for you to talk to your legislative leaders in your jurisdictions that you live in, to advocate for this bill, to try to increase the funding so we can support the veterans in our program and all the transitional housing programs across the country. Support. So we also provide, during the pandemic, we knew there were some other things that we did, right? We hired a nurse, right? Because we knew that nursing and clinical services was important. Therapy is important. Those are some of the positions that we hired. Why? Because going to isolation during the pandemic, veterans were isolated. Mental health assessments and needs went up. We know now that's an issue. We have a nurse that come on site. She was coming 2 days a week. Now she only comes one. Why? Because of resources. We want to continue the therapy services. Our therapist, she does a wonderful job in servicing our veterans. We want to continue that. But we also want to attract good talent. In order to do that, you need resources to stay with U.S. VETS and to help us do this job. We need those resources to help us so we continue to be the best at what we do, which is service homeless veterans. And any organization should be stuck with the decision, decide what resources do I cut from my service delivery portfolio. An organization is going to have to make a decision. Across the country. All right. I want to thank all of you again for coming. I'm going to take the congressman on a tour if they choose to go on a tour. They probably will mingle with the crowd for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. They do have